Hey, welcome to the Healthful Woman Podcast, the fastest growing podcast in women's health. Today's Monday, March 4th, 2024. Today, I'm joined again for part 2 of my podcast with Amelia Gold. As I mentioned last week, Amelia is a Juilliard-trained violinist. She's a master violin teacher, and she is the head of school and director of the arts at the Elisabeth Morrow School in Englewood, New Jersey. She is a neighbor of mine, a close friend, and an amazing person. Last week's podcast was terrific, and today, Amelia and I continue our conversation about the impact of an arts education on the social and emotional health of our children. If you missed last week's, I would recommend listening to that one first, and then today's. Thanks again to Amelia for spending so much time with me for the 2 podcasts. Really appreciate it. All right, reminders, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please, if you could rate this podcast, preferably with 5 stars. It helps some sort of algorithm that I don't understand. Also, if you have any questions for our mailbag podcast, please email them to us at hw@healthfulwoman.com or go to the website, www.healthfulwoman.com, and click on the link that says send us your questions. Remember, these questions are for mailbag podcasts, not your own personal medical advice. If you need that, please ask your doctor. Finally, if you want to pre-order the book that Emily Oster and I wrote called The Unexpected, it's coming out in less than 2 months. So you can look at our website and pre-order the book. And if we have any book signings, I will let you know. All right, thanks for listening. See you all next week.
Welcome to today's episode of Healthful Woman, a podcast designed to explore topics in women's health at all stages of life. I'm your host, Dr. Nathan Fox, an OBGYN and maternal fetal medicine specialist practicing in New York City. At Healthful Woman, I speak with leaders in the field to help you learn more about women's health, pregnancy, and wellness. We're back with Amelia Gold. We had an amazing conversation last week, which actually between you and me was just about 3 minutes ago. But in the podcast world, it's like dog years. It was last week. And I wanted to get into the specifics of what we're talking about. It was kind of general last week, which is great. And we sort of learned like a flavor of your philosophy, but I wanted to get into specifics. And the first question actually that popped in my head is, how many students do you think you've taught over the years? If you had to estimate.
So I actually know the exact number.
Oh my
which
God,
is 11,
that's so you.
I do. 11,647 students.
Are your 5 children amongst that group?
Yes, including the string festival.
Am I amongst that group? Even though you never taught me an instrument?
Not yet. You were not enrolled.
Okay. I am, but I do feel like I'm a student of yours in like a sensei type of, relationship. Wow. So tell me, what do you love about teaching music?
So I love teaching. I could teach typewriting and I would still love it. What I love about teaching and what I love about teaching music above that is that I love watching the light go on in a child. I said to someone the other day, I still teach the very beginning violin class in my school. And I can teach any class I want because I run my division. So I get to decide. But I said, there's a moment as a parent when your children say, Mama, and you have that overwhelming feeling, I don't have language around it, but of joy, of watching that human being child become who they're destined to be. And I would say that is it, having the opportunity to help a student cultivate their authentic artistic voice and cultivate that creative spark. That's really what we do at the Elisabeth Morrow School. That is our why, right? I mean, our why is teaching children, but that is like how I think about it. I think about every child being a diamond, an uncut diamond, and that they all have that brilliance and sparkle. And how do we as the adults facet that stone with the parents, the child, and the teacher together to bring out the brilliance? People who know me know I often say, we cut with a laser, right? What we say and what we do changes the facet of that stone. So the way we approach children matters. I often say, if you have something hard to say it in a way that makes it the least hard for a child to hear. One of my mentors at school, when I questioned why, when the child was 3 years old, she was sitting in a chair next to a child, just quietly. And the child had done something they should not have done. And so the teacher 20 years ago was sitting next to that child in a chair. And I said to the teacher, why is that child not in timeout? And she said, Amelia, do we want to punish the child or do we want to help the child to learn? This is a time in. They're being separated in the classroom, but I am staying with that child so that we can talk it through and to help them understand. And that mindset is definitely one of the most exciting things about teaching children. And in music, you help teach a child a piece and every single child will play it differently, right? If you teach math, which is an amazing subject, 2 + 2 is 4. It's 4 no matter who you teach it to. If I'm teaching Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to a child, it is going to sound distinctly different with each child. And I just find that forever amazing and exciting and hard.
Yeah, I was going to ask what your teaching style is, because I don't want people to get the impression that you're a pushover, because you are not.
Oh no,
you are. Because I was thinking you have a reputation as you are tough. You're demand. I guess maybe demanding. I don't know what the right word is. Yeah,
I love that you're naming that, because whenever you're going to talk about love and care, people think that there's no rigor. Rigor comes out of love and care. What I attempt to do with children every day is bring them into a state of flow where they are captivated by who I am, what I'm saying. And we train that. We train that level of focus. And that only comes through love and care. It's not from yelling at people. Then you live in a state of fear, which some people think is an elevated space, but it's not. You're in fight or flight, right? So what I want to do is have, high standards, high support. That is how I view it. So in our school, we have a tradition. Every child who comes in the building, I shake their hand every day as they come in. And I say, good morning, Nady. How are you doing today? And we have that time together. We've built that relationship. So you can only bring them beyond standard if they have that relationship with you, or else they'll, I call it spiky. The kids are spiky. They'll do what you say, but it's not intrinsic. You have to be much more skilled as an educator to begin in that space. And the reason I'm able to teach 300 children at the same time is that I have trained them to hang on my words. And that only happens if they love and care about me, right? If they don't, you can only hold that for about 12 seconds.
I assume it's also a matter of trust, that they trust that you're going to teach them, and they trust that if they don't do it correctly, you're not going to necessarily punish them. You're going to redirect them and you're going to help them get it right. But that takes a lot of time and effort.
Yes, it does. And every year at the String Festival, I have a different quote on the back of my t-shirt. And I spend all year looking at the quote, because you have to remember, 400 people are going to be walking around with this t-shirt with a quote that I chose. And that becomes the theme of the String Festival. And one year it just was my quote, which says, do it again. So what I'm trying to also teach the children is that they have to practice, that things come over time. And I call it skill and thrill versus skill and drill, but I'm just making it fun while drilling them over and over and over and over again until they, and then I train them. So it's not me saying you got it right. I'm like, is it where we want it to be? And then they're like, no, we need to do this, that, and the other thing. So it is a mindset of, again, going back to the sun, of, having children love their teachers and care about the direction they're going in and be responsible for their own learning. In a world where everyone wants an A on everything, that's why our school doesn't have grades in the youngest years, that we have, these indicators of skill. but we want the families, I'm reading them right now. Every child is getting 10 different narrative reports that are each, 500 to 1,000 words about their learning. And I think it's how great people create great things. No one, when my father was creating the field of pediatric neurology, there was no test to do that, right? There was a need, there was an idea, there were people that supported him. He wanted to be a doctor because he wanted to cure cancer. We've gotten so far away from that. And again, I love that you said this. People think that when your teaching is seated in care, they view that as not rigorous, which is the same thing with the Gold Foundation. You can't be a good doctor if you just love people, right? You can't be a good student if you're just kind. There are two pillars, right, in education. There's the social emotional and the academic, the skill, right? There is no great profession where you don't need those two. There's just none. And we're seeing now playing out when one of those pillars is broken. And you need both of those. So how do they inform each other? That's my lifelong journey, right? It's like raising kids at home.
Yeah.
When I was a young parent, I said, I'm going to write a book. And someone actually did and took the title I was thinking, like, how do you raise your kid not to be a jerk, right? That's in the end what we want to do, right? So someone wrote that book. But I was like, in the end, like, I want my kid to be a good person. I want my kid to be connected to another person, have a community, not be alone, to have friends. When we're thinking about what we want for our children, it isn't like, I want my child to be a high achiever, right? If they have all those things, then that creates the right environment for them to discover how they're going to make an impact on the world. And if that is the guiding question for education, we will glean the great minds. Because we have to remember that, during the Sputnik years, we were dealing in America with a creative crisis. And they had in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, they brought together all of these artists and creators to try to figure out why we were falling behind the Soviet Union. And it's because of the loss of the social, emotional, and the arts education. I've been in the game long enough to see when we were kids, Nady, I went to the old JCC nursery school. Mm-hmm. No one was talking about literacy. No one was talking about anything academic. It was like how to be a Homo sapien in this community, period.
Right. Sandbox.
Right? And I would say the dedication of those years in the old JCC, where everyone knew each other, it was very diverse within a Jewish community in those structures, had an enormous impact on me as a human being, filled with love and care, right? You didn't have enough money for the candy machine, Ronit Bialer would give it to you, right? That kind of community has changed. Everyone's focused on the end game, which for so many families, they think the end game is college, which we know the end game is actually life. That is, our parents were focused on the end game of life.
Right. Yeah. Colleges.
Most families now are not. They're not. They're not. They don't know they're not, but they're not.
Yeah. I mean, college is just the Hunger Games before the end game. It's
yes.
I love that you brought up the parallels between education and parenting, because I think that there's so much that sort of overlaps in terms of philosophies and in terms of impact, in terms of strategies. And let's just get to the meat of it. So in arts education, and for you, it's predominantly music, how does that benefit a child? If you were to sell it, someone comes to you and says, why is my kid learning cello?
Believe me, I still have to sell it every single day.
So hit me. Give us the pitch.
So the pitch is that arts education is the medium where children learn how to learn anything. And because of the intrinsic motivation and joy that is linked with arts education. That there's nothing like cold or, rote initially about it. That the children already have the buy-in, because I say this all the time. Children learn to draw before they can write. They sing before they can speak, and they dance before they can walk. Children are artists. We are all artists. And if you take that framework of understanding, that is then becomes the launch pad for all learning. And while in early childhood, people take that to heart, Dr. Suzuki, who's the founder of the Suzuki method, would say, if you don't maintain the heart of the child, eventually it will die. And that constant looking inward to create something outward will eventually stop. And that then becomes the multivitamin for intrinsic motivation, sustained effort over time, and learning how to make goals and reach them with a growth mindset. The growth mindset and the musical world are one. Like, I've been working on the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto since I'm 14 years old, and it's still not how I want it to be. What makes me wake up and want to do it again, right? Pablo Casals, the great cellist, at age 90 was asked why he still practiced. And he said, well, I think I'm getting better, right? So, the fixed mindset of children and of adults is the barrier towards lifelong learning.
Yeah. It is a metaphor also just for life. I mean, as people, the ones who are doing it right are always trying to improve on themselves.
Yeah.
One way or another.
Agree. And in terms of relationships, if you have that mindset, you're looking to your partner and saying, like, how can I help you, baby? What can I do to support you? You go to your children and say, how are things going? How are you feeling? And then they're free to say, mommy, when you say this, it hurts me. And if you have a growth mindset, you stop doing it. And my students all the time, I ask them all the time, I'm like, how do you think we're doing? How do you think class is going? What is the mood that you're feeling that I have right now? Checking in on clues. It's all connected. And our emotions and our ability to create is what makes us human beings. We're the only species that knows how to do that. So, it's only recently that has become extra. And, this goes into my work in terms of access, right, Nady? Like, there's a reason that the aristocracy had arts education and other people didn't. They knew the impact on the brain. The science says it, not Amelia. They knew. And I believe in many communities, it is still kept from people because they don't have time, because they're trying to close the learning gap, the achievement gap. It can't, to me, if I had to choose between recess and math for that day, I would make sure the children have recess. Not because math isn't important, because if the children don't have recess, they're not going to arrive in math ready to learn. So I would come up with some compromise to set up the children for success. And I feel the same with arts education, that it must be embedded into every curriculum, because that's who children and human beings are. To not have it is to be missing something. And it doesn't always look like playing an instrument. It's visual art, it's theater, it's public speaking, it can be debate, it can be so many other things that lean into that creative spark. That's what we need. And if we don't have it, we just don't turn out right. I mean, that's just the fact.
Does it have to start at a young age? Like, what if someone, they're like, oops, we missed that boat, and now they got a kid who's 10, 11, 12, 15, 28, whatever it is. Do you see, you obviously have kids who come into your school who didn't have this.
Yes.
And they come in at whatever grade. Do you find that the impact is as great or maybe greater if they start at a later age? I don't mean greater than if they started younger, but maybe greater than you would expect.
So it's so interesting that you asked that, because we have an orchestral program in the school. So they're all playing orchestral instruments. During COVID, I was worried that we'd have to go remote, and that I had new students joining the school, and to try to teach them the violin remotely, which I did, would just prove too difficult. or if it's a student who didn't grow up in the Elisabeth Morrow School world, they don't want to play the violin in the 6th grade. Like they came from a school where music wasn't cool. They didn't know about the magic of it. So I offered guitar as I call it the entry drug.
Because it's cool.
Yes, it's a gateway drug.
Yeah.
Because you can pick it up, you can learn it remotely, and there's like the rock and roll vibe to it that students who may not have that same lived experience as the other kids, like when they're in 2nd grade, our students go through a petting zoo where they choose an instrument, they get to try. It's a whole thing. You join in the 5th grade and you're like, I don't want to do that. And that has proven so magical that some of them have gone, they entered kind of like eyebrows up, being like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And as I say to, when they say that to me, I'm like, don't worry. Many of my best students were forced. That I have seen them become even more connected because they're given a choice. What prevents any adult, older student from being connected to arts is feeling like they don't have a choice or feeling judged by their choice. So, if I'm espousing the growth mindset, which is the reason I wake up every day, wherever you are in your journey, you're part of your journey. So maybe your journey was meant to start right now, right? So, maybe you've always loved music and you've always said, I've wanted to sing. I've always wanted to learn this instrument. This is the time to do it. Today is the time to do it. And I think it's even in some ways more powerful when I see adults take on hard things. I'm always learning something new, Nady, because I always say with one great ability comes many other disabilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm good at some things and I'm like really actively not good at other things. And so like I just started pickleball, right? And like I'm actively not good. And every day in Florida, I'd go out with my kids and I'd play and I'm really good at serving, not good at making contact with the ball. Like I still go back every day, right? Because I want to remember for my students what it feels like to go from 0 to 1, which is the best part of teaching for me. It's like I can't do it at all. And that first step, this is the time. And I don't believe it's ever too late. It's really harder as you get older. You need more of a mindset of like, I can do hard things as an adult than a child does. Because we have to remember, it is extremely significant that the children never learn. They have no memories of learning how to walk. Because I believe had they had those memories, no child would ever walk again. How many times they get up and fall, or crawl a little bit, fall on their face. How that is erased from our memory because we would never learn to do it.
That's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And if ABCs didn't come along with a song, no one would ever learn it either. So we know that in every language, happy birthday, ABCs are connected with music because we're wired to learn that way. Right. Music is the first language we know, the heartbeat of a mother. That's our first orchestra. That's what we know. That is the starting point.
So at EMS, Elisabeth Morrow School, everyone plays an instrument from when they come in, and you said they get to choose. They have their little petting zoo. They get to choose. They get to switch. And I'm sure one of the questions that probably comes to you is, can everybody play an instrument? Like, what if you just don't have talent? Like, and you're not good at it? How do you, I know what you're going to answer, but I'm just, how would you answer that to someone like, listen, my kid tried this. They're just not good.
Yes. So that's, I would say, in the old days, I used to say, if a kid comes to me and says, they're not good at math, I'm just like, I'm going to get you good at math. Right. I now would say, like, let's avoid fixed mindset terms when speaking about children and say they're not good yet. Or they, I believe in talent is a big discussion. That could be its own podcast. Dr. Suzuki believes everyone is born with ability and that it must be embraced and cultivated. That is talent education age 0. That he doesn't believe that there's, and therefore saying there's no such thing as talent. I have taught enough human being people that there are people that have learned things that I haven't taught them. I always say, like, when did Sarah Chang learn lightly row? In utero? Like, how did she get to this level age 5, right? So there are people who are born with certain ease and dispositions towards things. And what I believe as an educator is that every child is an artist. So whether they're quote unquote good at it is irrelevant.
Sure.
Through exposure, care, and love, and years of practice, they will be good. They will be better than they are now. But putting those fixed mindset terms on art do not coexist. Because the beautiful thing about playing in an orchestra, especially in our school where everyone is in it, is that the sum is greater than the parts. So when you play in an orchestra with 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, if I just have the 5th grade by themselves, they're not going to sound the same way as an 8th grader, right? But together, their sounds go farther than if the 8th grader just played together. Because they're listening, they're connecting, and making something beautiful and great together. And that they're all playing at the level where they're at, and I'm propelling them forward to be the best that they can be. And at some point, why did Einstein spend so much time practicing the violin? Probably because it was the hardest thing he was doing, right? It's so hard. And that's what I say to children all the time. That's a fact, not an excuse.
Right.
That's a fact.
Do you feel that you mentioned before how sort of the struggle and the learning and the improvement and sort of all these things is how we learn, and it's sort of the academic process.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to focus a little bit on the social emotional, because we touched on this last week,
Mm-hmm.
but you're talking about this idea of community and about playing with others in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
But what else does this quest or this activity, I guess, of going through musical education, arts education, how does it impact the social and emotional health? Or not just how does it do it, but why does it do that?
Yeah. I was one of the first students in America to learn the Suzuki method. And the Suzuki method is founded by Shinichi Suzuki, who was an engineer, not a professional musician. That was STEAM before STEAM was a thing in education. And after the horrors of World War II and the devastations in Japan, he had the idea that if you start children on an instrument when they're too young to know differently, that they would want to create beautiful things together, and that they wouldn't create bombs that destroy humanity. They would have one common language, which is music. So I actually had the opportunity to play for Dr. Suzuki on TV when I was 4 years old. So this is a part of who I am and what I know to be true. So what is the hardest thing for children is to deal with the forever conflict of feeling like they're the most important person on the earth and the least important and most insignificant person on the earth. What heals that divide is feeling connected to something and feeling connected to others. From my perspective, both as a parent and as an educator, this is the most important work of childhood, of understanding your part in a bigger whole, and how the art of working hard, there is drudgery to arts education, right? Like I always say, as I counsel families, if you have a child that doesn't behave, every child needs to be doing chores. Every child needs to be part of meaningful work in the house. What is your child's work in the house? What is their housework? And they look at me with a blank expression. I'm like, that's why they don't listen to you. They don't feel like they're a part of the community. The skill and thrill and drill are intrinsic to that experience. And what I am seeing, not so much in our school, where a third of the middle school is in the musical and everyone's on a team and we don't have cuts. There's a million things that we can do to structure that for success for kids, not because there aren't kids who are significantly better than others, but it's not putting kids into boxes before they develop some skill and time to develop them. so that they don't create narratives for themselves that say they can't. Going back to what you said earlier about like, I don't have talent. I'm not, it's like, you're 11. How do you know? How do you know you don't like this? It takes years sometimes to know if you like something. It's like, why do children not read? They pick up a book and they're like, I don't like it. I'm like, no, you have to invest an hour and a half in the book before you decide you don't like it. Like, what are those metrics? How do we set up the structures for children that allow them to unravel who they are and allow them to create those connections and feel like they have an important voice and that they can do important things, right? Like, we just had Martin Luther King Day. I was thrilled to hear, I was talking to Carrie White, my dear friend and colleague at Schechter, that they're doing, a day of service. They're praying with their hands on that day, as my rabbi would say. What can they do actively together that will create more beauty and harmony in the world? And there's many ways to do that. And it doesn't only have to be arts education, but the big differentiator is that arts education has a soul attached to it.
That's so interesting. That was literally my next question. I was going to say, you're obviously talking about the arts, but couldn't the same principles be applied to kids who are doing team sports, gardening? I mean, it could be anything, right? That kids are, if they're focused on and spending a lot of time on and working on to improve, that provides also a sense of community and belonging and passion. Even if, let's say, someone's not in a situation where music is an option for them or theater, this concept of improving the social and emotional health of children through something else could be applied to those as well, I would think.
Yes, I say definitely. And when there's a creative and open-ended part to it, that is really the recipe, right? We have to remember, we want our children, they're not dancing around in the woods all day, right? We have provided structures of what we think is important. I always say to parents, you can only choose 3 things. What are they? Like, what are the non-negotiables for your family? Because you can only have 3. If you have more than 3, you'll have children that really dislike you and will not, then they won't do any of them, right? So, I think in terms of what they need versus what we think they need versus what our egos are demanding of us, telling us what they need, right? So my kids went to my school not because of the outcome of high school and college, just because I knew this environment is what they need, right? If you put those children in those environments as parents of what they need, and then we're looking for those opportunities for them to be who they're supposed to be. Children come through us, not from us, from my perspective. And they come into this world with their ingredients, and we want to help them be who they're going to be within the structure of what we think are important as families. So there is a cognitive dissonance in terms of raising children and teaching school, right? Like, I was in a conversation with a parent where we did not agree. And I was like, we're going to have to agree to disagree. And that's part of our core values, right? Courtesy, cooperation, consideration, and compassion. We don't have to agree on everything. This is how the school is going to do it. This is how you're going to do it at home. I don't see that they're in disharmony with one another. But having meaningful things for children to go deep and wide in without any end game is like the bravest thing a parent could do in today's world, maybe. And when our parents were little, that was called Tuesday.
Yeah. And it's also not always, we're talking about it in this sort of majestic sense, but it's not always easy for parents. I mean, listen, our girls skated together, and I think ice skating was an amazing experience for them, and all these things sort of applied, and it was wonderful. But it was cold as hell standing outside as parents trying to watch these stupid ice skating recitals, and it's like 30 degrees below, and we're just, trying to like pour down hot chocolate into ourselves so we don't freeze to death. So there's some unpleasantness to it, but you're investing. I mean, you're investing in their future. Like with music, it's not easy for you to go to your kids' lessons, and it's not easy to drive them around and do all these things and buy their instruments and fix their instruments and deal with them freaking out when they're having a bad day with them. But
100%.
but listen, that's parenting, that's education. You're investing in
is.
something that's important. Yeah, I just wanted to complain a little about the ice skating thing. So that's all. That's why I brought that up.
It's interesting that you named that, because when both my kids did hockey, that did skating, if you were to ask the children, most of them would say music is also their work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's their work and their joy, but it was more work. Skating and the sports, that was just for the joy of childhood. And I think if there are parents that are listening, you need all of those it can't all be joy and it can't all be work. Sometimes that intersects, but they need both.
Yeah.
Like, there's some things you got to do just because you're a kid. It's like how traditional camps are now out of style because everyone wants like a pre-professional camp, and how that flies.
A mechanical engineering camp.
That's what I'm saying. People want to go to specialized camps. And listen, I run one, but mine is only 5 days.
Right.
And everyone says, Amelia, make your camp longer. Everyone wants to go 2 weeks. I was like, no. Because during the summer, children have to play. They have to focus deeper on the social emotional state of being, because that's where they're experimenting, trying things, being brave, getting out of their comfort zone, separating from their families, camping out in the woods, whatever that is. And now they want to go to school. You have to remember, many families send their kids to school and then school after school. And I don't know if it's also like that in the Jewish community, but in the independent school world, this is something I'm fighting night and day. They want to go to school and then go to all of these academies that push them ahead far, far above grade level in the approach, in the attempt to try to like one up the next step. It has, in almost all cases, the opposite result for children.
Right, misery.
So what we're seeing, there's a book, and I don't know if you've read it, called How to Raise an Adult. As a parent, an educator, I'm always learning. So basically, like, I teach children, but I also teach parenting because, we partner so closely with parents. So that means I'm always having to learn. And sometimes I'm just like, I don't know what to do. Let me really think about it, right? Like, I remember when I had my oldest child, Josh, and they gave me Josh to take home. And I remember looking at the nurse being like, you're giving me this baby. You don't even know me. Like, how could you give me this kid? I don't know what I'm doing. Right. So anyway, Brian's my husband, went to go hear a talk at Harrisman where our kids went to high school and the author spoke about, how to raise an adult. And as she's talking, Brian and I are kind of like patting ourselves on our back. Like, yeah, we rocked it. Yeah, we're doing great. And then she started talking about other things. And we're like, yeah, we're not doing that. Oh yeah, yeah, okay, we messed up. Yeah, I never make them make their bed, or whatever it was, right? And so, like, as a parent and as an educator, you do have to have the commitment, going back to what you say, like, what do you do if it's later on in life or they're not good at it? You also have to have the commitment to say to your kids, I was on this path with you and I don't think it's a good path. Let's pause this path and try something different. Like, that's the growth mindset. That's an artistic way of being. If you find I always say, I never yell at children or my own children. I really don't. Like, if you were to ask any of my students, does Miss Gold yell? Never. It's the ultimate failure. Right?
Right. You just give them that big smile and they know.
That's what I'm saying. That's what they say. You give them the smile and they're like, oh no, we in trouble, right? But like, being able to admit, there's a new after school math program that came out when my kids were in elementary school, and all my friends and I, who are really committed to social emotional learning and protecting childhood, were like, oh, this seems like a really cool thing for them to do. So I signed them up for this after school math program that required a lot of extra skill and drill and practice and some teachers that weren't aligned with the practice. And my kids were like crying going to this math program. And I found myself being like, come on, guys, get it together, blah, 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 blah. And then all of us have our little kids crying, going to this math program after school. And we're like, what? Why are we doing? Why is this good? Well, we don't want our kids to be soft, right? We don't want them to, not
fall behind
be
to the Chinese, to the Russians.
Like, come on, get on the program. And
it's
then
like 1984.
all of us together, exactly. All of us together were like, this is not supporting their learning. So, that was a parenting fail, So and that's something we talk about, so I had to then undo that, with the kids saying, we thought this was going to be good and it's not working. We're going to try something different.
Growth mindset.
That the growth mindset is everything. And, when I became the principal this year, that was the required reading I gave to my families, because while I live in the world of the growth mindset, not everyone is joining me in that world. So I oftentimes think we're speaking different languages. And we're actually going to read an assembly. So every week I run an assembly, and it's something different that, the faculty participates in, and they present things. And we're going to read the book, The Power of Yet, which is a growth mindset book for children. And I would really encourage anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about right now to read the book Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck, who is a doctor in Stanford who studied the impact of mindset on learning. And going back to what I said a little bit earlier, the growth mindset is the artistic mindset. They inform one another. And I was looking, Noah is auditioning for Interlochen. He's gone there every summer, but you have to re-audition. And now he, in addition to film, he wants to do theater. And I explained to him, it's really difficult to get it in for theater. And most likely he'll get in for film because he's gotten in before, but you never know. But go for it. And I watched Michaela work with him. Michaela's my second child. On his monologue for hours. And him taking all that feedback from his sister. I'm just saying, like, that's not easy. And she is also, she's a skilled director and an actor, et cetera, but still. And how he just went back, practiced it, knowing that he might not get this. And I turned to Brian and I'm like, okay, we're on the right track with Noah. Noah's going to be okay. Noah is going to be great because he has the skill, he has the heart, and he has the intrinsic motivation. Because we know that in a world where everyone has perfect scores in all A's, that is now becoming irrelevant. It's all going to blow up. You're hearing it from me, and I'm sure you're hearing it everyone else. Like I said to a parent of a first grader, Katie, I'm like, I don't know what the role of college will be for your child.
Right. Wow.
You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Yeah. Amelia, you're the best. I love talking to you. You're awesome.
You rock.
Yeah. Thank you for taking so much time. Although, as you did astutely point out to me before, since you run a school, you can declare a snow day whenever the hell you want. So you get to sit at home in your pajamas.
I am currently, I've been working on report cards all day in my pajamas with a fleece blanket wrapped around me. Thank goodness this is only my voice.
Amelia, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and really just an amazing topic. I love what you do. I love talking to you. I love your philosophy, and I will see you on the block.
Peace out. Thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate the time as well.
Thank you for listening to the Healthful Woman podcast. To learn more about our podcast, please visit our website at www.healthfulwoman.com. That's HEALTHFULWOMAN.com. If you have any questions about this podcast or any other topic you would like us to address, please feel free to email us at hw@healthfulwoman.com. Have a great day. The information discussed in Healthful Woman is intended for educational uses only. It does not replace medical care from your physician. Healthful Woman is meant to expand your knowledge of women's health and does not replace ongoing care from your regular physician or gynecologist. We encourage you to speak with your doctor about specific diagnoses and treatment options for an effective treatment plan.